Hi, so in this one, we're going to be exploring how to accept user input as integers or floats in Python using the input function that we took a look at previously. So what we'll do is, first off, we'll just open up PyCharm and create a new project. Let's call this new project something like simple calculator, because we'll be building a very quick mini project and learning about the input statement using a small project. So as soon as you create the project, remove the breakpoint, as always, remove the default code, and we're ready to start coding. So when I say that we're going to be learning how to take user input as integers or floats, the question is, couldn't we just already do that with the usual input statement? Well, let's take a look at it. So now let's say that I'm building a new calculator and I have two numbers which are stored in two variables called number one and number two. So let me create the first variable, which is number one, and that's equal to input, enter the first number, and yeah, and then I take number two equals input, enter the second number, and then what I do is I just print number one plus number two, oops, equals, and I'll write the name of our variables, which is number one plus number two. So this should ideally ask the user to enter two numbers, store them in the variables number one and number two, and finally print the output as number one plus number two equals the result of their addition. So let's take a look at whether that actually happens. So when I click on run, it says enter the first number. Let me take the first number as 100. Then it asks me to enter the second number. So let's take the second number as 200. Now as I press enter, I should get number one plus number two equals 300. But what do I get? I get 100200. Well, that's inaccurate, and we've already come across this case. This means that two strings are being concatenated or joined with each other. So that means that the input function by default takes a string input or a string value from the user. And how do we know that? Let's just print out the type of number one and print the type of number two and run the program again. Once we run that, and let's give the same input again, number one is 100, number two is 200, and it tells us that both the numbers or both the variables belong to the class str. So the question is, how do we actually take an int or a float input from the user so that we can actually perform this mathematical calculation? To do that, what we do is we typecast this input so that as soon as the user presses enter after entering or typing out their input, our typecast turns the string type into an integer or a float. So what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to write int and then cover the whole input statement in an int typecast and the second one as well. So when I do that and I click on run, first number is 100, second number is 200. Now it says that I have a class int entered. Let's make sure that that's the situation. So let me print number one plus number two equals, and then I'll just put a plus, and within brackets I'll put our variables, which is number one plus number two. Now the question is, will this actually work, right? I hope most of you all have already guessed whether it'll work or not, and also know the reason why, but let's find out. Now when I run this, I'll enter 100 as the value for the first number, 200 as the value for the second number, and then when I press enter, it gives me a type error. What does this mean? This means that the type error says that you cannot concatenate a string with an int. In this case, we have a string that is number one plus number two, and this would return an integer result. So it's the same problem that we had in the previous exercise. So what we'll do is we'll simply typecast this result into an integer, sorry, into a string. And once we typecast this result to a string, it's going to calculate this value and then turn that integer value into a string value and then attach it to the string. So when I click on run again, number 1 is 100, number 2 is 200, and now I get number 1 plus number 2 is 300, right? Pretty simple. If I take this as a float, and again a float, now if I click on run, let's take 35.5 as number 1 and 35.5 as number 2. So this should give the answer 71.0, and that is what it exactly gives us because it typecasts the string into a float. So that was it, guys. That was all about this very quick mini project where we created a simple calculator. What you could also do is you could take this line and you could create a subtraction, multiplication, and a division functionality to your calculator. You could add that and you could see how the calculator works. This is super simple. There's so many more logical things that we can add to our code so that our code can actually make decisions. That is something that we're going to be getting into in the next part of the course. So hang on, have fun with this, observe the code. I hope you guys have followed along with my exercise, and if you haven't, just take some time after watching this video and write this down, type it out, code it out, run it, and see for yourself so that it gets imbibed in your memory and you know how to actually accept integers and floats as an input to your variables. Until then, just have fun and I'll see you in the next one.